Welcome, welcome. So we're gonna start with a butterfly pose. And I'm gonna do mine as a seated forward bend. But you could, if you would prefer, you could lie down and do it as a reclining pose, and then you'll just join me in a seat with the next pose. So you can make the pose as comfortable as you like. I like the pose to have a little bit of a stretch, but not enough that it makes me tense up. I want to be able to relax, even though things are a little bit, there's a little sense like, ooh, I can tell that I'm stretching something, or I'm putting stress on the tissue. It's probably more accurate. Although the description we might use is stretching something. All right. And then I will often build myself like a little place to rest my forehead, because I find that soothing. So you're welcome to do that as well. If having your back rounded doesn't feel so hot, you can keep the spine a little more sort of in line with whatever angle the pelvis is willing to come to, right? So some of us, the pelvis will want to stay more upright. Some people, the pelvis will tilt forward more. You can just build up a stack of pillows to intersect at the appropriate spot. And then relax. Once you've got a sense of stretch, you've settled into a version of the pose that feels good or interesting, then let every muscle relax so that we are coming into the shape as best we can with the most sort of open softness, kind of soft awareness. Even more important than relaxing the outer muscles of the body, which is also important, but even more important is relaxing the kind of the nervous system. So the breath can be useful for that. And you want to just breathe in a way that's deep, rhythmic, and smooth for the most part. You can apply different techniques as you like. Sometimes I'll hold the inhale just for a little brief bit, and then let the exhale be really gentle and soft. And that one works for me often for sort of slowing me down and calming me down. But in lieu of something like that, you can also just do a nice, smooth, rhythmic breath. We'll stay for a while. You might kind of do a little check-in with the muscles in your face, around the eyes and the mouth. Make sure there's no tension there, that the mouth is soft, the eyes relaxed. I'm going to take a kind of gentle curiosity towards each pose. Inside of our last minute here. We're going to take a nice big breath. Let yourself kind of start to unpack the pose on that inhale. The next inhale, you might unpack it a little bit more. Straighten out your legs. If you're laying on your back, you can add some movement and eventually come to a seated position. For the next segment. In between poses, of course, you can move in any way that you feel called to. I really, one of the really beautiful things to me about yin is that it really opens an opportunity for us to become very intuitive. So even though I'm kind of guiding us with which pose to do, like how we approach that pose, how you approach the space in between poses, you really get to let yourself sort of feel that out and be guided. If you feel like you need to move a lot, move a lot. If you want to just move a little tiny bit, do that. Sometimes I just want to be still in between poses. So whatever that kind of feels like the right answer is what I would suggest inviting yourself toward. Now, we're going to take the dragonfly shape. So from a butterfly to a dragonfly, still in the, can you tell that I'm longing for spring? Still in the sort of garden creature category of poses. Although a lot of them, frankly, are garden creatures. So we're gonna do a seated twist, and with the legs in a V, and I've got a little padding under my knees. You might want to sit up on some padding, like sit on a folded blanket, and then just pick one of your two legs and turn toward it. Not so much that you start to lean out of the hip of the other side, right? So at some point when I start to twist, this hip will flex to accommodate that. I don't want to go that far. I really want this twist to just be about my spine and the relationship that my spine has to the rib cage and all the muscle and tissue around that, abdominal muscles, the diaphragm, the spine extensors, just the muscles that hold my spine, my ribs, and my torso together. With the understanding that there is absolutely nothing that is not already connected to each other in the human body. Everything is one big woven web. But that said, more of the emphasis on this kind of relationship to the spine. Now, of course, everything's connected to the hip as well. So there's the connection to the pelvis itself, but without adding in the hip joint that meets the leg. How's that? So more about this kind of center of the body, this, kind of main pathway of our nervous system. And sometimes I find it helpful to have like little arm rests So I'm experimenting with that. My arms are not all the way, they're not as super long. So even though I can touch the ground, I have to almost be up on like little spider fingers. So sometimes it feels nicer to sort of let my palm hold on to something. This may not be an issue for you. Your arms, your hands may actually rest comfortably on the floor. In which case, carry on. And then I'm just noticing, you know, as I breathe and as the pose kind of hangs out with itself, it'll slowly creep around a little more into the twist as fluid is redistributed through the connective tissue between my vertebrae, and all of those things happen. You know, the tendons and ligaments that hold my spine together just gently accommodate the shape. It's easy for me to overdo the neck and overdo the lumbar spine, so I'm trying to be mindful of both of those. Like there's a little bit of a twist as much as it wants to give me in those two areas, but the primary focus for me is really the ribs. Often that's the area where we lose flexibility and fluidity from our spine. The ribs almost kind of, that whole area, especially if we don't move a lot, becomes very solid, and so we lose some of the kind of inherent fluid quality that our spine had when we were younger. And so one of my favorite things about twists actually is it sort of helps me tune into that sort of individual movement of each vertebrae, the relationship that the ribs have to those vertebrae, and keeping all of that in a sort of fluid relationship. So we're going to stay for like another 30 seconds or so. One of the things that happens when you've been doing yin for a while, sometimes you'll dial in so tight into the little nuances of everything that, you know, time goes by a little faster than you realized it was going by. But in any case, this might have felt like an eternity. It might have felt like no time at all. We're going to unwind the spine just enough to sort of point down whatever leg it was that we turned toward, and then we're going to fold over that leg. And at this point, if for whatever reason this is too much, this inner thigh or the knee of this other leg, you can bend that one and do a half dragonfly if you'd like. You could also do a side bend here instead of folding forward, and that will just change the relationship and the dynamic. The joints to each other, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we'll hang out here for like about 3 minutes. Again, kind of unwinding around the mouth, through the eyes, this kind of center channel from the throat all the way through, like unwind any connection or any tension that you feel like around the collarbone, throat, breastbone connection, like that little space. Unwind any sense that you have that the chest muscles or the shoulders are trying to curl in toward the front. Unwind any gripping or tightness you feel in the navel solar plexus area. If possible, have a little bit more of a sort of soft relationship to the lower abdomen, groin, the place where the leg and the hip meet. probably kind of in that near the end, last 30 seconds-ish of this pose. So we're going to take one more breath. Go with an ah sigh. And then use an inhale or a couple of inhales to sort of unwind that pose. So we're going to do one more pose in this kind of, you know, one side at a time paradigm. And that is, we're going to bend this, the leg that we were just folding over toward, we're going to bend that one so that it makes a 90-degree angle. And then this other leg, whether it's bent or straight, we're going to turn it around the back and make a 90-degree angle. So we've got an internal rotation at the hip here, an external rotation at the hip on this front leg, and you can just sit up, or you can kind of lean to your side a little bit and, you know, make that space right there at the front of the hip a little wider. You can lean forward a little bit, which will shift more of the sensation into this, you know, front outer hip. So you get to decide how you might want to set that up. We'll stay here for about 3 minutes also. So again, like once you're in the pose, you kind of find ways to settle in. And if you change your mind about how you want to set it up, this first minute is a really good time to sort of figure out, maybe I like it better this other way. You can experiment a little bit. And then ultimately we're trying to, again, give into it. We're trying to create a kind of open, soft curiosity about how this pose is going to unfold. we're in that last little bit, just that last 30 seconds-ish of this pose. Now to get out of this, I'm going to kind of lean into this front leg direction enough that my knee comes off the ground there, and it's easy for me to bring that leg back out of that shape. And then before we do the other side, take a moment, right? You can do whatever movement you might like. You can be just still. You can lay down, stay sitting, whatever seems like the right answer. Again, just kind of, be guided by that on your own. Oh, it might be a good time to get a sip of tea or whatever you have handy to drink. I'm finding myself shifting out of winter mode and into spring mode. And a couple of days of warm weather have definitely helped. But like I'm craving iced coffees and iced teas and those kinds of things instead of the hot variety. that is my MO. The question will be like, will the cooler weather coming in the next few days send me back into the winter mode, or will I continue in my spring mode? I cannot tell you the answer to that right now. All right, so we're gonna take our legs out, if you're ready, into the V shape again, that dragonfly shape. And again, we're gonna start with the really simple twisting shape. So we're just gonna turn and pause right there. And I'm gonna try to keep my weight centered in my pelvis, so I'm not leaning or creating any sort of sensation right there at that hip joint. No more so than is already there from the sitting in this position. I want mostly to feel this kind of relationship of my spine, my ribs, my hips, my shoulders. I'm letting myself get kind of centered and really gently present, right? I'm trying to, again, sort of soften this whole central channel of the body. The vagus nerve runs from, the brain, through the throat, through the internal organs, down all the way to like the end of the large intestine. And my personal opinion is that is the pathway that the yogis were back in the Middle Ages, were feeling or noticing or becoming aware of and naming chakras from. There's other possibilities too, but this is my theory, is that they were becoming aware of these sort of placements or interplay of the way the nervous system works with the body and our awareness and attention. And so can we bring some conscious attention to this notion of relaxing all along that pathway through the center of our body? So there's both the physical, like science, nervous system, and then also the archetypal, metaphoric notion of the chakras or the energy centers in the body. Both are powerful in their own way. So you work with whichever one you like, but if if there's a kind of information that comes to you, like about a specific area of your body, or if a color kind of seems to show up for you. For me, it happens like, when your eyes are closed, there's color sometimes there. For me, there is anyway. Right now, most of the color happening when my eyes are closed is in a green spectrum. And so, I might tune into this area of my shoulders and my chest, and there's a little kind of slight bit of extra sensation around this collarbone. The yogis gave each of these areas a color. It's possible that there's like some sort of nervous system thing that creates that spectrum. It's also possible that this is just a sort of depth psychology, Jungian sort of quality that, you know, we have all these ideas planted in our brain, either genetically or socially. Either way, it shows up. So it's interesting to just be present for. Okay, we're going to stay for like another 30 seconds, and then we're going to fold it out into the forward bend. I talked you guys through that whole thing. Not even sure I said anything of any importance. I apologize for that. Hopefully it was interesting at the very least. Sometimes I geek out. Now I'm going to leave both my legs straight, right? I'm just going to, on my exhale coming up here, fold over this leg up front. It's going to be the territory that I'm moving into. And again, it could be a side bend. You could have a bent knee. Like, all of those things are possibilities. Just do the one that's right for you. Every time I get into a pose, I spend the first minute or so testing it out, like leaning a little to the left or the right, trying to find the most centered place usually. But sometimes it's interesting if you go off center. Sometimes I've discovered territory. I'm like, well, I'm going to stay right there tonight. Like, that's a surprise. That's interesting. You know, I usually aim for symmetry and balance, but it's not always the most interesting option. And then after the first minute or so, which is where we are now, can we settle in, let ourselves get really soft and curious, attuned to this nature of yin, which is, while changeable, also very receptive. Nature of yin compared to the nature of yang is, you know, again, we're working on these really primal archetypes. They show themselves up in tarot cards as the lovers. They show themselves up as this kind of, during the winter, especially winter holidays, as a kind of interplay of lightness and dark. We're coming up to the spring equinox, which is that point where there is an equal amount of light and dark, you know, physically, our relationship to the sun will become kind of equal between night and day. And so we might kind of be feeling some of that interplay as well. It's just, you know, we're using our body as a medium for understanding this archetypal notion. How do I become as receptive as I can? How do I become as fluid? How do I become open, you know, curious, but in a kind of gentle way? Yin is a little more playful, yang a little more intent, right? Full of intent. And we invite a sort of playfulness. We're going to take a nice deep breath, by the way. And let go. And then we'll float ourselves up and turn this into the deer pose. Speaking of playful, there's lots of variety of deer. The one that we know, you know, here where I live currently, there's the little white-tailed deer. Those are the ones that are the most ubiquitous, maybe the only deer in this area. I'm not positive, but that's my theory. Where I grew up, the deer that were more common were these kind of large mule deer or little antelope. And they were very different, right? Antelope kind of like have that little springy, playful quality. So as we come into the little deer pose, instead of doing bug poses, we're doing like a nice woodland creature. You might, again, keep it upright. You can fold forward. You can lean a little toward the back, whatever area you want to target. We'll stay for about 3 minutes. Again, kind of working with this notion of allowing ourselves to become as yin as possible in our approach to the pose, the practice, hence the name Yin Yoga. Ooh. Releasing tension from the body. Tension is yang. It's very vigilant and watchful and active, right? So the whole approach, that kind of embracing of yin, is an embracing of releasing any sort of feeling that we have that we're trying to direct or force a pose to go where it goes. It's a very different, I think it's a very different approach to yoga compared to other styles where we're much more intentional about how we want to use our bodies and muscles. And this is much more about sort of, okay, I'm going to start here, I'm going to breathe, I'm going to see what happens, I'm going to open myself to the possibilities that the pose is offering rather than attempt to direct the pose from some intentionality or forceful notion. I like to say that yin is the power that, carves the Grand Canyon slowly over billions of years or however long it was. Yin is the quality that, grows stalagmites and stalactites from tiny drips of mineralized water seeping through cracks in the earth. Yin is the quality that grows, over time things develop. And that's the approach to the practice. So I'm going to stay for another minute. I'm going to be quiet now. Hang out with your own experience. Take about 3 more breaths where we are. So I'm leaning into this front leg. I'm going to pick up my back leg and bring it back around. Take a moment here. Give everything a little bit of movement. Now, we're going to do a little sequence where we're going to lay on our back, and we're going to start that sequence with a supported bridge pose if it's available to you. You can, instead of doing supported bridge pose, do either a saddle where you kneel on the floor, sit down between your feet. You can have pillows or whatever in between to sit down on. And then you lean back, right? So it will become a really intense stretch of your thighs, your hip flexors. And the top of your shin, the top of your foot will all be on the ground. supported bridge pose, we're going to use something to hold up the hips. I'm going to use this pillow. You can use a yoga block. You can use a stack of books, just one book if it's a nice big thick one. Or you can take a blanket and fold it so you've got, you know, a couple of inches worth of blanket to go under your hip. I like to have a blanket for my shoulders because my my neck is not very long. It's very short comparatively speaking, and my C7 vertebrae, this bottom vertebrae right at the base of my neck and the top of my shoulder, is very sensitive. And so if I put a blanket down and I put my shoulders on the blanket so that my head sort of rests a little bit above or a little over the edge of the blanket, and I kind of can tuck this blanket in underneath my neck, I find that more comfortable for anything where I'm doing an inverted posture where my hips are higher than my head. Okay, so I will play with the edges of that, but the support, you want to go not under your lower back. So right now the support is under my lower back. So I'm gonna back myself up on here until, well, I'm gonna make sure I'm not laying on my hair, but until what is being supported is my pelvis and my sacrum. So the curve of my lower back that usually goes in, right? That is in the air, it's free. And my pelvis is situated on top of the support so that these big bones and the bones in between are stable. My hip joint is actually resting on the edge of the pillow as well. And then I can extend the legs out so I get the stretch through the hip flexor and through the top of my thigh. And this one for me is a little more comfortable than the saddle, right? The saddle for me requires lots and lots of pillows, lots and lots of support because my knee does not want to bend to that degree. Now this can feel like a lot of back bend. So if that is the case, you can put one foot on the ground, which is a more traditional bridge pose setup, and have one leg out straight. Okay. And then I'll give you a little halfway mark and we'll switch. So we're gonna stay with this guy for around 4 or 5 minutes. I'll tell you at the last minute and you can decide whether you want to stay longer or not. Whatever pose you've chosen. Both of the options I've given are totally not your style. You could also lay on your belly and prop up like a sphinx, like prop up on your elbows. That will also do the trick. Salad not too long ago. I'm suddenly very aware that I ate a salad a couple of hours ago. That's one of the potential downsides to inversion. So again, if that is really, really uncomfortable, you can flip the pose upside down onto the belly. Might not be quite the same. Once we're here and we've sort of established a setup, we're just letting ourselves dissolve into the pose, relax as deeply as we can. halvesies, you might switch sides. So we're going to stay for about another minute. All right, so I'm gonna slowly release this pose. Now, depending on what you did, if you did a saddle, you might have to sort of sit upright to come out of it, or you might be able to lean to one side and unwind one leg at a time. With this supported bridge, I need to lift my hips up and slip the pillow out from underneath. I'm gonna set this guy off to the side for now because I will use that later. And then we're going to give ourselves just a moment to sort of release the pose. If you were doing a Sphinx, then you just want to flip it back over onto your back when you're ready. You might need a little child's pose or some little cat-cow movements or something like that first. And that kind of sense of the back bend is still there for me, so I'm going to keep moving around really gently until I feel that area of my lower back sort of release. That sense of wanting to hold that curve in that same way. And we're going to do a pose called the cat pulls its tail. And this you can do laying on your side, or you can sort of add a little bit of a twistiness to it. So I am going to use a strap. Hold on, if I can figure out where I put it. Oh, there it is. I'm going to use a strap to hold onto my foot because, again, I have a short arm. I have some restriction in terms of how much I can flex my knee. So when I hold my foot, there's only one speed, one sensitivity level, and that's 11 on the volume control. So if I put the strap around my foot, it's much kinder and I can pull the foot in more or less. Like there's room for me to adjust the sensation. So if that is also true for you, then you're going to pick a leg. I'm going to start with my right foot, and you put the strap around that foot, and you can hold that instead of holding your foot. Otherwise, you'll just hold your foot. Now, I'm going to roll onto my right side, and if you're going to stay on your side, and you can use your arm like a pillow, or you can, fold up a blanket or grab a pillow or a yoga block and use that as a pillow. So if you'd prefer not to have your arm under your head, you can do it that way. I'm going to start like that just because it's nice. And I might need to use this arm for a second. Then we're going to bring that leg that's on the bottom. So this is my right leg. I'm going to bring that foot up and reach back to hold onto it with my left hand. And then my left leg, I'm going to put that foot on the ground right in front. So it sort of makes a little bit of a kind of number 4 between the legs, although one is bent, so it's not exactly a number 4. There's a little bit of a crisscross. And so I could stay just like that, just laying on my side, or I can roll this shoulder down toward the ground. And then there's a twist in my upper back. So I'm gonna do it a little bit of each. A little bit of twist, a little bit without the twist, because we're gonna do another twist. So we don't have to get that in just now. Hold on. I need to loop my strap so that I have a little bit more of a break. A little less flow and a little more break if I can do it. Okay. Maybe. All right. This leg can also go out straight, and sometimes I will do it that way as well. I do like the sort of dynamic between bringing my foot up and letting my foot pull on my shoulder, pull on my arm a little bit. There's a little bit of a stretch that happens in the front of my shoulder because of that relationship. Oh. Again, I'm going to try to relax as deeply as I can, especially through the nervous system. I'm trying to relax my hip flexors, let that thigh, if it will, extend back a little farther. It may not want to. I'm going to stay for one more minute with this setup. So I'm going to just start this process of sort of creeping this shoulder a little bit toward the twist, because ultimately what we're going to do is turn this pose into the twisted vines, or some semblance of a twisted vines pose. All right, so I'm gonna release my foot, and for the moment, I'm gonna straighten that leg out, because I'm gonna lift up enough to wrap my bottom leg around that one like a vine. So this could turn out like an eagle pose, where the foot kind of cups around. Mine won't, but I get it as close as I can. And then you might need to fill in some territory, because we're gonna try to get the upper back to lay flat on the floor. And then I'm going to take a blanket and just tuck it in against my lower back so I can lean my lower back into the blanket a little bit and kind of roll that shoulder toward the ground. So I'm trying to find this sort of dynamic where my thighs are as close to crisscrossed and wrapped around each other as possible. So I hit this outer hip for the sensation, and then this twist in this upper portion of the back, right? So this blanket in my lower back just helps me focus the twist a little higher up. So we're coming back into some of the same territory maybe that we found in the first seated poses, but with a different relationship to gravity here. We'll let ourselves sink in for a few minutes. Again, I just loop my awareness back around, like I found myself trying to grip a little bit with my inner thighs, so I'm just trying to relax that. I needed it long enough to get started in the pose, but I definitely didn't need to hold it longer than that. And sometimes you'll find like little places where you're holding on with the muscles that are sort of sneaky and underneath the conscious awareness. That's half the fun of this practice, actually, is me sneaking up on muscles that I'm holding tension on and going, relax. We're inside of the last minute we're going to spend here. Just a wee bit longer. So I'm going to take a big breath. I'm going to unwind this by rolling back onto my back. So taking the blanket out, kind of rolling back and then unwinding the legs. Oh my goodness. I'm going to kind of scooch over so I give myself a little more space for the other side. Now it's, again, this is a chance to move around a little bit or do some adjusting or just to notice. So for me, the left side of my body, which was the side that was on the top of that twist, has a different sensation, but the top of my right thigh also feels a little softer than the top of the left. So I feel taller on my left side, but softer on the front of the hip on the right side. Then I don't know what's true for you, like, you know. So notice the dealio. What do you feel? You can give yourself some movement. So I'm again going to use the strap for the cat pulls its tail. I'm going to hold on to my left foot with my right hand this time. So I'm not quite ready to start this whole thing yet, but I'm getting it kind of set up. How's that? Set this guy over here because we'll need him later. There's a point usually for me after like I've moved enough where I just feel a kind of calm relaxation. Okay, now it's time to start again. Ugh. So if you don't feel quite like that yet, you don't have to come into this other side just yet. So again, I'm bringing my left foot back behind me, reaching down, holding on with this right hand. I'm kind of hanging out here on this side. Got a little brake strap here. So when I layer the strap a certain way, it doesn't, it's less likely to sort of fly out of my hand or glide out of my hand. It sort of holds itself in place. So I don't know if you can find that exactly. I don't know, I'm not exactly sure how to tell you to do it except to sort of loop it over itself and then see if it works. I'm trying to Sort of let my shoulder relax, let my kind of inner mouth and navel and everything just kind of soften into this shape. Let everything get as relaxed as possible. We just got a little bit longer to go. Oh, I thought I could go a little further and then I got a hamstring cramp, so maybe not. Maybe I changed my mind on that one. We'll see. We got 1 minute left here, y'all. I'm going to kind of add that little bit of a twist here. Take away the thing causing the hamstring cramp, add in a different layer. Oh, goodness. So, I'm going to release my foot. I'm going to slip the strap off. You may not have that step to do. And then I'm going to wrap that, leg around like a little vine. So my right leg's wrapping around the left one in this case. Find a way to get my upper back on the floor. So I'm going to adjust this pillow until it feels like it'll hold me right there. So I've got a nice stretch through this outer hip. I'm going to put this little blanket into my lower back area so that I keep this hip stretch, but I can kind of lean into that stretch so the emphasis is more on this upper portion of my back again and a little less on my lower back. That's just a sensitive area for me. So as I get older, I'm taking better care of it. Or trying to anyway. And then relax in and breathe. Side is a little spicier than usual for me tonight. It's very interesting. So again, I'm trying to instead, like my inclination when something is a little more sensitive is to sort of tense up around it. So I'm just seeing if I can invite myself to soften a little bit, release the pose slightly, and find that I want to stay in an interesting edge without it being overly tricky. Like right now there's no burning sensations, there's no numbness or tingling, but if those sensations start up, which is something to be mindful of for sure when poses get spicy, then I might back off. But for now, I'm just trying to bring as much sort of, again, gentle curiosity, a sort of open, soft approach We're going to stay for one more minute. Work out some kinks in my shoulders. And then just pause. So I'm going to leave that for now, although it got way more interesting as time went on. I'm going to gently let myself release that pose. Because I was feeling like a little bit spicier in my hip, I was feeling a little bit spicier in my shoulder, I'm going to add a little bit of movement in both of those places. Maybe more than I would normally, but because that was very interesting. Kind of spicy. Now, our only task ahead of us is a relaxation pose of whatever ilk seems like a good idea. Oh, I'm gonna do a pillow underneath my legs and then just let my legs stretch out. If you wanted to, you could put your legs like up on the edge of the couch or in the seat of a chair so that the legs are held a little more elevated. You could do a legs up the wall version where they go straight up. As long as it's relaxing to you, that's what's important. You can lay on your side instead of on your back or on your belly. So as you like. I am gonna cover up with a blanket. It's gotten a little chilly over the course of the evening here. Oh. And then we're just gonna let ourselves rest for like 5 minutes-ish. Something in that range. Oh. So this pose not so spicy, but again, we want to really focus on this sense of a kind of willingness to relax, a willingness, like willing, sometimes like just the root of that word is will, and so it's maybe the opposite, but a sort of receptivity to relaxing. How's that? Like letting ourselves really just let go. The outer body muscles, but also down that inner channel where the main nerve of our parasympathetic, our relaxation response, meanders through our body. Can we, with a little bit of attention, just soften there? And allowing it to remain soft, just release any sense of action and just be. So we're not going to move yet, but just notice the breath again. We're going to take a nice big breath. And a big deep sigh. You can stretch and move around. We'll eventually come to a seated position and hang out with each other again. For a moment, anyway. So thank you for practicing with me. Stop choking myself with my own top. Let's take a nice big breath together. Big inhale. Big deep sigh. Namaste. Welcome to the rest of your night. Thank you so much.